Michael O'Neill, welcome inside the Crazy Ant Farm. How are you today?
I'm really good, guys. Thanks. I love the name of this,
Oh,
the
awesome.
Crazy Ant Farm.
We
What
like to
does
get a little
this?
crazy, a little round table conversation. Just kick back and talk about your career, man. You got a lot to talk about.
Well, they let the old guy work for a long time. Thank goodness. I have one question for you guys though. What does a sane ant farm look like? I
We don't
just
want to know, Michael.
It's true.
We couldn't tell you, and if we did, we'd be in trouble, I think. So,
Exactly. We'd be out of a job.
well, we'll just leave that one go then.
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, congratulations on the huge success of the launch of Council of Dads, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But we're so happy
Okay.
that you're on to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. We're excited about it. We've been living with it for a while, so it's nice to let it breathe and get it out in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, I mean, we've got so much to talk to you about. Such a storied career. I was a huge fan of the West Wing and your work on the West Wing and the unit and so much stuff. And Logan has some beef with you about Grey's Anatomy.
Just saying.
We're going to get into that one in a little
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I felt a little piece of my fanny hit the floor.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a fun part to talk about. But first, what we like to do is kind of give you a little introduction to the listeners and everything, and kind of tell them how you got started in the industry and stuff like that. So, was it something you always kind of knew you wanted to do from a young age, or how did it all kind of come about, man?
You know what, Dustin? It wasn't. I was of a generation that was in Vietnam, and when it came time for the U.S. government to invite me, they began to wind the war down, and so I was not called to go, and it left me with a lot of freedom that I didn't anticipate having. And I decided to leave the South and go to California because I wanted to see some of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And all the world lived in California, don't you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and so I loaded up my car and I drove out there, not knowing where I was going, and I got involved by invitation with a little Shakespearean repertory company in Topanga Canyon, a little open air theater company, and I went from being not an actor to being a bad actor, and not a very good, and then a not a very good actor, and then an aspiring actor, and then a guy that was earnest about his effort, and then I got better. Thank God.
I'd say you got pretty good because, like we talked
Agreed.
about, the career has been pretty long, man. So I think you're doing all right.
Exactly. 122 acting credits. I mean,
Yeah, come
so
on.
many notable ones, man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to hear how it comes, though. Sometimes we have people on and they were like, "Oh, when I was 6, I knew right away this," and then others who just kind of fall into it and have
Right.
these amazing careers. It's always so cool to hear like that.
Well, you know what? I'm intimidated by those people that knew at 6.
Agreed.
I did the only play I ever did in my life at 6 years old. I
Right.
was a leaf in the school play, non-speaking part.
There you go.
And I must have blown it because I didn't set foot on a stage again for, I don't know, 18 years, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be pretty gung ho at 6, right? Like I
Right.
still had the towel around my neck and playing Batman. I mean, that's about as best I could do at 6. So I don't know.
Yeah, but it's as sweet as it gets,
Okay, let's talk about it. You're the father of lovely daughters, correct? Myself
I
also.
Rich and girls.
Yes, girls are the best. What are you shying them away? Are you like, don't come into this industry, or how's that? I'm always curious about, like, especially somebody who's had such a long career in it and seen the ups and downs of the industry. How are you with them?
They're very, very supportive, Dustin. But that none of them have any interest whatsoever in going into the entertainment business.
There you go.
They just, they grew up with sort of the vagaries of the uncertainty of it and my, emotional ups and downs. And they thought, they said to me one day, "We want to go to a real job." And I said, "I think that's a great idea. You guys do that." So I don't think I'm in danger of any of them following in their father's footsteps. Although I will say this, they've been incredibly supportive since Transformers on. They were
right.
they were about of the age to figure out that I was actually an actor when I did Transformers. And I was in a theater in Palm Springs on the holiday weekend, and I walked onto the screen, my character did, and all of a sudden one of my girls goes, "Dad, that's you." And you know what happened? Every head in the theater goes, zoop.
Yep,
Right,
yep,
like, oh.
absolutely. It's like, thanks,
Yeah,
sweetheart.
yeah, we got some splaining to do, Lucy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, and I mean, but economics background. So I mean, that's got to help during some stretches when you're an aspiring actor, right? I'm gonna be able to figure out the finances. I'm assuming.
I wish that were true. Uh, I think about some of the jobs that I worked. Listen, I was a bicycle messenger in New York. I was a carpenter. I was a obligatory bartender.
Sure.
Taught school for a little while. Was a construction worker for a long time in LA. You just do what you do to keep body and soul together. So I understood that part of the economics.
There you go.
But I never really got to use the degree, if you know what I mean.
You're a brave individual, though. A bike messenger in New York City. That's
seriously.
a brave individual.
I don't know if that's brave or dumb.
It's a very thin line.
It is.
And it started early in the morning, and the thin line just got thinner and thinner.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, you play very brave individuals. A lot of senators, a lot of military guys. You're like these very distinguished, hardcore gentlemen. Do you like that, or because I get the sense that you're a pretty funny guy as well.
Well, gosh, I'm not funny. I wish I were. I couldn't carry a joke in a bucket, but they think I have authority because of the mustache.
Is that what it is? Okay.
I've thought about this a lot, and I really do think it's the mustache. They assume I'm either law enforcement, and that used to happen to me a lot. People would think I was a cop. And
Interesting.
I had lunch at a little deli here not long ago, and I got up to leave, and the woman that was sitting at the table next to me said, "Hey, I know who you are." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, you're the cop who put me in jail."
Oh.
Yeah. So I started to back away, and I said, "I'm glad to see you're doing better." And I left. Because you don't want to get in it.
Right.
No, of course not.
But I think that's what it is. I think it's just, that I have some sort of military bearing or something.
Well, you do it extremely well. I have to say that you do it extremely well. And I want to talk about, let's jump in and talk about West Wing, because man, what an incredible character that was. And what a stretch, what a run on that show. Talk about that a little bit. Phenomenal cast. I mean, Sorkin's writing on the show was brilliant. What was it like to be a part of that?
My first day on the set, Dustin John Spencer, who I had worked with, that played Leo, the chief of staff. And John took me by the hand because we'd done a couple of films together in a play. And he introduced me to everybody. He vouched for me.
There you go.
He said, "This guy's one of ours," because they were a really tight ensemble,
Oh, absolutely.
And the writing was so good. And they just open-armed me. They just let me in. And I didn't know when we first started that role was going to have an opportunity to develop and recur. And the script supervisor came to me one day on set and said, "They like you upstairs. You'll be back." Now,
that's always good to hear.
It is, except every time I've ever heard that, I've never been invited back. So I was like, "Oh, man, I really like the show, too." But they did. Aaron continued to invite Butterfield back. And then they had that wonderful episodes, or the 2 episodes in The Shadow of the Gunman.
Mm-hmm.
And that was based, guys, on verbatim the experience that Jerry Parr had, who was the Secret Service agent that pushed Reagan in the car.
Right.
When Reagan, you remember that whole thing? Well,
absolutely.
I got to talk with him, and he went through it chapter and verse with me. I mean, moment by moment by moment. And I said, "Can I introduce you to Aaron Sorkin?" And he said, "Of course you can." And so all of that behavior in that episode, everything that happened there, Jerry gave to me on the most generous platter. And I'll be forever grateful to him. And the Secret Service was really generous to me. They taught me a lot. Mm-hmm. They gave me a lot of tips, a lot of pointers, a lot of bearing. And so the obligation for me was to play them as honestly and with as much dignity as I could, because they were the real thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was acting, but it touched on some very lifetime sort of issues for me.
Well, and and you could tell. I think that had a lot to do with the popularity of Ron and why he did keep coming back. I thought just the emotion that you show. I mean, you're back and forth with Alice and Janney, and just like in so many scenes I can recall in my head, it was so emotional. You could just tell that there was something there that you were pulling from, and I just thought it was fantastic, man.
Yeah, thank you, thanks, guys. I appreciated it. That one let me in. That role sort of helped me get inside of Hollywood, and it kept me there, if you know what I mean, because it was such a popular show.
Absolutely.
I mean, speaking of popular shows, I got to talk about it. Go ahead. I'm going
to hit me hard.
I gotcha. But I'm just going to say, McDreamy, he's my little man crush. Everybody knows it on the show. All of our audience knows it.
It's literally a running joke for like a year now that's his man crush. So.
Exactly. So I hate your character for what you did. But on a serious note, what was it like being on that set with such a serious tone of your storyline? And what was that like off camera? Like, were the cast really just welcoming, bringing you in, or what was that like?
Not so much. Because I was a pariah,
right?
And so it leaks a little bit in the relationships. No one treated me badly. I don't want to indicate that at all, because that's not true. They were all very, very professional with me. James Pickens, I think, was probably the most gracious. But everybody had a job to do.
Definitely.
And so what they knew was that I, as an actor, had to create the trouble, and I was in a lot of trouble personally, as a result of that role. So they gave me a lot of space, is what they did, and it was respectfully done. But the thing that happened to me on that show that I had never had happen was because I was isolated a lot. I kept my chair away from everybody, because that character needed that.
Definitely, especially after his wife passing, and especially thinking it was wrongful death, and all that.
Yeah. But every now and again, a grip would walk by, or a gaffer would walk by, and they'd just tap me on the shoulder. They wouldn't say a word. They just put a hand. They just put a hand on my shoulder, because they knew they could see it.
Right.
And I always respected that, and I appreciated that a lot, that they were that, they were caring. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. They knew I was in pain, and they was going, keep going, guy. You're doing your job.
That's so interesting. It's like, listen, man, we like you, but you're gonna shoot Derek.
Yeah,
that's not okay.
That's not okay.
So you stay in the corner.
Derek was late in the game. I thinned the herd pretty good before I ever got to Derek.
That's right. It's true. It's true. Oh, man. But, Logan brings up a great point. Such a controversial episode.
Yeah.
I mean, with the gun law issues in this country and safety issues in this country and everything. Yeah, it's funny that we jump from West Wing to this with 2 shooting incidents, but it was such a powerful episode. And I enjoy episodes like that, though, because they stick in your mind and they do make you talk.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for conversation in this country, and I respect you, and I really like episodes like that get people talking.
Exactly, and I love what you brought to that character and what you brought out, because you were coming from a place where you were doing the right thing because someone you loved so dear was taken away from you at the wrong time. So it definitely starts a conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that was Miss Ryan's intent, was for us to take a look at the ease of being able to get a gun in this country. That was a big issue. And also, we don't take care of people well enough that are on the margins. This guy was clearly, the only thing that tethered him was his wife.
Right.
And once she was gone, nobody ever bothered to look in on him again.
Exactly.
And I think she was trying to make a point about that. But, I appreciate what you say. It was probably the hardest job I've ever had. But also one of the most, to look back on it, and I don't look back on it much, but to realize that I'm not going to have many performances in this life like that.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. No doubt about it. And of course we have to, because we have a little running joke also amongst ourselves that I'm a huge Resident fan and he's a huge Grey's fan, and you're our second guest now that's appeared on both shows. So
what is that about?
I know, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to stay out of the hospital, particularly right now.
Yeah, do not need to be there.
No.
Yeah. And I never turn up as a popular character.
No, you weren't a very nice guy on The Resident either. So
yeah, which sucks because you're a really lovable guy. Like, you deserve justice.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know. This show we're doing now is going to give it to me.
There you go.
oh, definitely. And I want to briefly about Dallas Buyers Club because we're talking a lot of television, but you've done an amazing amount of films as well and some biggies. I mean, Dallas Buyers Club just jumps off at the top of my head.
Yeah, and I mean J.
obviously.
Edgar with Leonardo DiCaprio, like a lot of good ones.
Absolutely. And I want to talk Clemency too because I mean Elfrey Woodard and Richard Schiff, little West Wing reunion there.
Yeah, that was pretty remarkable to get to. And Aldous Hodges, who I had worked with on Leverage.
Absolutely.
Alfrey called out and said, "Michael, I have something I want you to do." And I said, "Alfrey, I'll wash your car if you want me to. So, tell me where you want me to be." Because she's just, she's kind of extraordinary. She's an extraordinary person. And when I found out I was going to get to work with Richard again, and Aldous, it was, and the nature of the material, it's, we don't see the death penalty. It's warehoused. So it's not something the public actually gets a glance at.
Right.
And
absolutely.
Of course, in the film we show 2 executions, and that took a little while to get, recover from.
I bet.
It kind of sticks to you, even though I know it's a pretend world, but if you pretend hard enough, there's some blowback on it, and those actors were extraordinary. Aldous, and they were just extraordinary. I don't know how else to say it, but. Yeah, I think, I just saw where Colorado repealed the death penalty yesterday. And that's a big deal. So there's something in the air now, in the water, and I hope in the mind of consciousness. I saw a little blurb that it cost $3.5 million to try somebody for the death penalty, which is 23 times more than the cost of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Wow. Staggering numbers, right?
Isn't it? Yeah, it's wild.
Well, okay. From an actor standpoint, especially one who said, how you got started and everything, I'm just curious. Do you have a medium that you prefer? Are you more of a TV guy, or do you like the film aspect? Or, I mean, which one?
It's funny you asked that, Dustin. I used to like film more because there was more time. But that's not the case. Like in Dallas Buyers Club, we shot that film in 22 days.
Oh, wow.
It just, there was no lighting package on it. We did existing light only. So we literally ran from one location to the next because we were trying to outrun darkness. And so film used to have the luxury of more time and more exploration and rehearsals and all that. And that's not the case anymore. So my truthful answer is I prefer television, but for the same reason that a lot of writers do. It's the long form.
Right.
You can explore so much more. You can put a pause on it and come back to it, or turn it in a way that no one saw it coming, which Aaron Sorkin was so brilliant at. But, in that regard, I think we're sort of in a golden age of television right now. It's exploding with so many good writers and storylines that I'm like, whoa, I'm glad I lived this long.
Well said. Well, okay, so let's talk about the biggie then. Council of Dads, your new show, debuted last week, and just absolutely phenomenal. It's getting a lot of praise. It's being compared a lot to This Is Us with the ensemble cast and the heavy drama and comedy and everything. I'm super excited to talk about this one. I think the premise is absolutely brilliant. For anybody who doesn't know, who didn't catch the pilot episode, and if you didn't, come on, what's wrong? It's about a father who, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, it's about a father who is diagnosed and finds out he's dying from cancer and feels like he still wants his kids to have a fatherly influence or a dad influence in their lives. So he brings together this collection of friends to take the place of him after he passes to be the father influence in the kids' lives. And I got to tell you, it's just absolutely brilliant.
Well, you're a dad.
I am a dad.
And the first thing that you would think of if something threatens your life is, will my children be okay? And the sadness is I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be there to walk them down the aisle, and I'm not going to be there to comfort them if they lose the big ball game or celebrate if they win whatever it is. That's the most gripping thought you have is, will my kids be all right? And I love the premise of this, that he brought together 3 guys from very different walks in his life.
Right.
Anthony's a childhood friend, and it just kind of, he's a free spirit and a chef and creative and unpredictable. And then, Oliver is his oncologist and happens to be his wife's best friend. And they share a friendship. Their daughters are best friends. So they know one another. And then my character, Larry, he sponsored, Scott, the father, sponsored, and I love the fact that he's younger than I am, but he sponsored me in AA. So he knew that I'd lost a family to
Right.
alcoholism, and brought me in to ask me to be there for his family, and not knowing if I had the skill set to do it. But I think he knew that I needed them as much as they needed me.
Absolutely.
And so it's a wonderful, and I do think you're right. I think it's an honest look at society as we are now, but an honest look at what any of us would try to do, given the thought of our imminent demise and not being there for our families.
Well, absolutely, and I think the reason it's a hit, and I think it's going to have long legs, is because it's something you can connect to. You said it right. That is, it's a snapshot of society today, and maybe what we need more of, and highlight less of what we don't need, but. The reason I think that it's going to do so well is because you can connect, and I think those are the shows that do the best, is when you can connect to a character and or a storyline that you've been through, or somebody that's been through. And I really think this show is going to do that. I lost my dad when I was 8, so I know what it's like to kind of come up without having a father. And then I had health issues myself. I already had a heart attack, and my immediate thought was, what happens if I go now and my kid is young and doesn't have a father like I had to grow up with? So immediately it's one of those storylines where I saw it and I was like, oh, I could definitely connect to this. And I have to imagine there's going to be a bunch of people across the country that are going to feel the same way.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry for your loss. I just think, and I'm glad you survived.
Me too.
And I'm glad for your kids. It's just, I do think people are going to, some people it's going to hit really hard, and because they're going to have events in their own lives that, they're going to look at, and it's going to resonate for them. And I hope it's cathartic for them in that regard, And some people they're going to stop and think about, wait a minute, what happens, because we're not wired to think about our own end.
No.
And so there's a whole lot going on here. And if I may add, there's also a lot of humor in this. Sarah Wayne Callis, who plays Robin, she plays the wife and the mom of this wonderful brood of children. And, she is quick to point out, you better bring your Kleenex, but you're also going to laugh some. And I think that's important, that we can try to make sure that we incorporate that.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of humor in tragedy. Well, I mean, that's just reality. Sometimes that you're so grief stricken, you don't even realize that what you're doing is pretty freaking funny. I mean,
Yeah, and grief is so different for everyone, and it's also different. It exercises itself differently in different times. How do you define it? It's so hard to know what this particular moment of grief is going to do, because it will surprise you. It'll turn and do something ridiculous. So I think we've incorporated, as much of the uncertain, as we can. And how do we, and then the question becomes, how do we move forward? How do we help them?
Absolutely.
How do you figure out a way, what somebody needs, and love them in that way? And, Larry, who's the old guy and sort of a tough love kind of character, thinks he's right most of the time. And that's not always helpful.
It's the mustache. We're going to blame it on the mustache again. Anybody with a mustache is always right. I mean,
Thank you. I'm going to tell the writing room that get on that.
You have him call me if he's got any problem with that, all right?
I would definitely do that.
I'm glad you brought up Sarah too, and the rest of the cast, because it's a phenomenal cast. I mean, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Thomas Everett Scott for a long time, and I just think the entire cast is brilliant.
Yeah, they did something special with this, and the wild thing for us is when we came together so quickly. I genuinely liked them. I 30 seconds after meeting them, or certainly 30 minutes after meeting them, I cared about who they were, and I got an idea of who they were. And then as we worked together, it's the fastest I've ever had a genuine affection grow in the cast. It made me think of the West Wing in that regard, because they had that respect and affection for one another, and it happened quickly,
And you guys shoot this in Savannah, right? It takes place in Georgia. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, it was a character in the piece. Savannah's gorgeous, and it's based on a book called Council of Dads that Bruce Feiler, who was a Savannah native, wrote. And so when they decided to place it, they said, let's place it where it started in Savannah. So we were there for 5.5 months filming the series, and really adored it. Boy, Savannah was great food.
Yeah. Oh,
Food.
yeah. Definitely. This you're talking to a New Yorker that moved to the South, and yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Southern food. So
Yeah, we're going to take us out in the yard and run us too, but it's really good food.
absolutely.
But what we like to do at the end of each interview is ask our guests, what piece of advice would you carry on? Because this podcast is about helping the up-and-comers trying to break into the industry. What piece of advice would you pass along to the up-and-comers, and what pitfalls would you say to try to avoid?
Well, in terms of what advice to give in terms of moving forward, I'd say the actor's job is to show up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you show up prepared, but the first thing you have to do is show up. And that sounds silly, but I've seen auditions where the actor wasn't there. You know, and so just for yourself, show up. And the other thing is never let your neuroses exceed your talent. You just don't want to do that. You know, the work is too hard.
Right.
And it's better, I think, you know, who am I to say? Because a lot of us are neurotic. We all are. If you got to be 40 feet tall on stage to be seen, there's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
You know, and present company included. So, yeah, just do your best to show up and work on your craft. Two things you can take care of that you can take care of. You can work on your craft and you can take care of your community. You need somebody to eat spaghetti with. You need somebody that, you know, is going to buy you a beer when the audition didn't go well, or you got close to the job and didn't get it. And just keep working on it until you get so good they can't not hire you.
There you go. I mean,
that's great
advice. And I always love the camaraderie aspect to it. You know, have somebody, as you said, to eat spaghetti with, because it is an industry built on rejection. So you've got to have some people around you that can help you get through that. And so that's always good advice to hear.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I hate to give bad advice.
No, I got to tell you, this has been one of the more enjoyable interviews that we've had. It's just been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, I appreciate you guys doing it. It's clear that you have a lot of fun, and you know, I'm prone to seriousness, so I appreciate you sort of lightening me up a little bit.
Oh no, we
of course,
yeah, it's been our pleasure, man. And look, open invite anytime you want to come back and talk about the show or just anything you got going on, man. Open invite, because like I said, you've just been an absolute pleasure to talk to, and I know the listeners are going to love it.
Well, hey Dustin, thank you for that, and I'm going to take you up on it, Logan. You know, I'm going to make it up to you for shooting McDreamy.
Thank you.
Go,
Thank
see?
you.
So you can't see it right now, Michael, but the smile on his face is huge. It's like literally knocking me out of the room right now. So he's going to hold you to that. You better watch out.
So funny.
All right, I'm going to work on it. I promise. You know, I'm going to be redeemed before it's over with.
There you go.
All right.
So
You
listen.
guys take care. Thank you again.
All right, now take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh my goodness. That guy is just like, honestly, just a guy you can just sit in the room with and talk to for hours and hours and hours.
Seriously,
Like,
he didn't he feel like a family member?
Yeah.
He just felt like you were hanging with an uncle or
Yeah.
just, what a phenomenal guy and just a lot of fun.
yeah, seriously.
I like how he pokes fun at the fact, though, that he is taken so seriously all
Yeah.
the time or has this serious demeanor,
Exactly.
you know. And, but he was a lot of fun. I thought he was hilarious. So,
Agreed,
yeah.
agreed. I mean, that I guess it kind of sucks in that instance to be like kind of typecast as such a serious guy in all
Right.
of these serious roles. So to letting him like lighten up a little bit and like just take the edge off is really nice to see.
You know what I thought, though, and I love the fact that we talked to him about both The West Wing and Grey's Anatomy, because I thought it was really interesting, and I'd love to get some comments from our listeners on this too, about like when you're the protector in a shooter situation,
Yeah.
and how the cast treated him and reacted to him on The West Wing,
Yeah.
but then when you're the shooter,
Compared
how
to-
the
yeah.
cast and the crew reacted to you, like in the Grey's Anatomy. That was really interesting to hear how
Yeah.
that went down. You know,
Exactly.
so whew, some good stuff, man.
Exactly. Can't wait for you to redeem yourself for the McDreamy shootout. But thank you again, Michael O'Neill, for coming on the show.